Hi, everyone. I want to put out a minor update to the previous video because a couple of discussions have come up on the Facebook groups and also via email. And I wanted to address these. So, again, I don't have to address them in the video that I'm going to follow up as part two for this discussion. The first thing that I want to say is I understand why some people would think that this is specialized knowledge, but I don't really agree with that. Because what do you consider special knowledge? Um, for example, a lot of people like using fishing guides in the chase. Well, I consider that special knowledge. Now, what I mean is, uh, I fish. I'm going to be 58 years old, and I fished most of my life, right? But I never really got into it like in that depth of a sport. To me, fishing is you just get a hook, line, and a sinker, maybe a bobber. You toss the thing in the water with some bait on it, and then you fish, or you get a lure of some type, and then you cast it and reel it in, and let the lure attract the fish, or you fly fish, which has flies that you have on your line, and they stay on the surface of the water, and you fish like that. But when I talk about getting in deep, which means I didn't research the temperatures that certain fish require to be in and so on and so forth, I would not have known that brown trout, for example, is a cold water fish. To me, you just find a body of water and you start fishing, and that's about as far as I take it. So I would never have considered, going to a fishing guide because I still consider that special knowledge. And also, where I draw the line is I believe that anything he mentions, and I guess that would include fishing, but anything he mentions in the thrill of the chase is a good target. Okay. The thrill of the chase is what he tells us to reference. Now, he references many things in there. Who is Hemingway? Who's Fitzgerald? J.D. Salinger. What was the Tet Offensive? What happened in the Vietnam in 1968? Where's Lubbock? Where's Fort Worth? Where's Temple? Is there anything interesting there? What happened during the Depression? You know, why did they have rations on gas and tires? What sports were popular with kids back then? What new trends were taking place? Why does Forrest always talk about learning something by doing it? Why his father kind of taught him street smarts. So I don't believe that we need to do in-depth research on Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Salinger, the Tet Offensive and Vietnam. You don't need to become an expert in it, but you need at least a brief synopsis so that you can understand the stories that you're reading in his book, just so you can put relations together. Okay. Now, even though there's math involved here, and I mentioned spherical coordinates and stuff, you don't really need to go that in depth. You need to know that the Earth is mapped out with lines of longitude and lines of latitude. That's how we locate places on Earth. That's really no more complicated than understanding how to read a basic map. And Forrest makes references to stuff that's in here, but I don't, and on top of that, he even suggested twice, I think, that an understanding of geography would be helpful. Well, this is geography. Where are the continents? What that's what this is, right? So you need to know enough to be able to look up the places that he mentions. All right. And the other point that I want to address is I didn't mention any exact coordinates yet, and I'm going to do that in the next video. Perhaps I'm going to go into that a little bit deeper. So right now I'm kind of giving you a high level view of how things work, and then we can get into specifics later. But I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say that Forrest describes one area, but he's really talking about something else. And a lot of his stories, interesting enough, you can take the coordinates that he's describing there. And by coordinates, I mean just go on Google Earth and go to the place. Type in the name, Chapone, or Toy Hall, and you can go there and just take that coordinate. You don't need to go precisely on top of the base that he was at. And certainly you don't know precisely where he was shot down, although we have a good idea. But those coordinates are meaningful. And I explained that in the previous video. I'm going to explain it more in the next video. And the other thing I want to mention about, keep it simple, and Forrest doesn't think things are complicated and so on. Well, then explain this to me. Forrest in 2010 comes out with Thrill of the Chase, and that's where the poem was officially released. Yes, you can get the poem online, but it came with that book. The Thrill of the Chase is a package. It's a puzzle. It's a mystery. It's not his autobiography. It was designed for the sole purpose of describing a single aspect of his life and provide support in the form of hints to the Thrill of the Chase that you could resolve the clues. Now, certainly, you don't need those hints. You could take the poem and go to where warm waters halt, you know. But what are you basing the decision on of those locations? You're using your own bias, what you think where warm water salt is, or what you think the canyon town is. I believe that it's better to find out what Forrest thinks that those are, and what are those hints. Now, the problem with the hints in the book is that the chapters that contain the hints are not in any particular organization that's going to aid the searcher. But I believe, and I've been discussing this for, I don't know, 2 years now, at least, and that was why I created my channel, that the Thrill of the Chase poem not only tells you where to go on the earth to find the chest, but it's a guide that takes you through the book. It takes you to the hints. Just like there's a place where warm water halts on the map, there's also a place where warm water halts in the book. Now, the thing with the book is it's extremely difficult to locate these hints. I found a way that I believe works, and I sort of gave it the information to get you started on that path back in 2018. I don't really want to go into depth with that because, as far as I know, there's only one or two other people that are kind of on the same track as me. And it's information that I'm just not prepared to give out yet. But I believe it does exist. Whether or not you believe is another story. But that's okay. Everybody has their own beliefs. But again, if this chase is so simple, why did Forrest have to write 3 books? And then we're approaching what, almost 300 scrapbooks? We have hundreds of Forrest Gets mails. We have like 50 vignettes. We have like 50 plus interviews from magazines, TV, book signings, all kinds of videos all over YouTube. We have Jenny's Q&A. We have Jenny's surprise Q&A. We have years worth of stuff that's been archived on the blogs, failed solutions stuff. So it's been 10 years. And here we are, and not a single person can claim to have solved even one clue. Because even the people that did solve 2 or maybe more clues, according to Forrest, they didn't know it. They didn't understand why they were there. So technically, nobody, not a single person, including myself, can claim that we solved even one clue. Okay? And obviously, when you read the poem, it's pretty clear that he purposely made all of those clues so vague that it'll fit 1,000,000 different places across the 4 search states. So he claims that we were able to walk precisely. So in order to get to somewhere with precision, you absolutely have to have an X somewhere. There's no X on the map that he provided, and he said he's not going to provide one. So maybe the poem tells you, once you've decided, first of all, you have to understand the poem completely. Then you have to solve the clues. And that's where the book might come in if you need the hints. So you solve the clues. When you get to that point, you should have precise locations of those clues. Now, perhaps instead of following those clues in a linear fashion, you use them as instructions in order to locate a precise point of where the treasure is. And that's what I've been trying to do for a long time now. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to this image again, and I'm just going to explain a couple of other things off the top of my head that I had forgot to mention. So, people are wondering, well, how did you get to 45 degrees latitude? Well, where does everything come in? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of interesting things. As you know, first of all, the freezing point of water is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Now, 32 degrees in latitude actually cuts directly through the center of Texas. In New Mexico, it's the southern border of New Mexico. But in Texas, it cuts right through Texas. In fact, There's a town just north of Lubbock, Texas, which Forrest mentions in the book. Just north of there is a town called Middle, Texas. Well, Middle Texas is right smack exactly on 32 degrees. Okay. And when Forrest discusses various hints in the book, I believe that, and I don't really want to get into it in this video. I'm going to do that in the next one, hopefully. That he hints at spots like this. He'll make strange references like frosty, and he'll discuss something being cold to the touch, and halt is freeze. In the police terms, halt. The criminal's supposed to stop what he's doing, stop moving, stand there, stay still, right? So, as you all know, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to know that lines of longitude extend from the north to the south poles. 180 degrees west of 0 degrees, which is Greenwich, and 180 degrees east of Greenwich. Okay. Longitude 90 degrees. Longitude 90 is approximately in the middle of the United States. Okay. So I'm talking about 109 in my previous video, but basically 109, not 109, 90 cuts through the United States, puts you in the middle. Well, the latitude lines go from the equator to the South Pole, and those are all south, okay? And everything from the equator to the North Pole is northern latitude. Now, if you take half of 90 degrees, it puts you at the 45th parallel, okay? So that is one of the reasons. Now, that's Forrest always says, me in the middle. Well, we're in the middle. We're in the middle of the United States. He gets you there to the United States, and then the 45 would be halfway between 0 degrees at the equator and 90 degrees at the North Pole. Is 45. Okay. Now the other thing that's interesting is that if you look at all of the other places he mentions in the book, whether he's talking about Vietnam or even Germany, all of those places are on the northern hemisphere, and they are all within 180 degrees. So in other words, like 45 would go near, cuts through Europe, and of course it cuts through Asia. Okay, and then he mentions Cozumel, which is where Skippy died, and he died. They buried him in the standing position. Okay, or he said they should have buried him in the standing position. Well, Cozumel is at 20 degrees northern latitude, and it's 87 degrees western longitude. Now, if you look at Laos, Vietnam, which is where he was shot down, that's at 20 degrees latitude also, but it's at 102 eastern longitude. Okay. Toi Ha, Vietnam, where he was based at, is at approximately 13 degrees latitude and 109 degrees eastern longitude. Now, if you look at the same locations in longitude, both of them cut through Yellowstone, because Yellowstone northwest corner is at 45 degrees latitude and 111 degrees western longitude. Yellowstone's northeast corner is at 45 degrees latitude and 110 west longitude. But the park does extend into 109. It goes to 199 and 49 minutes into there. Kind of near, I think it's called Sunrise Peak or Huju Peak, somewhere between those two is where the actual park extends. That's how far east it goes. But if you were taking the northern exit, the northeast exit ends up at 45 degrees exactly latitude and 110 degrees west. All right. So the difference between the points that he describes in The Thrill of the Chase, latitude wise, is roughly 32 degrees. Almost all the places he mentions are in between 13 degrees and 50 degrees latitude and occur between 109 west to 109 east longitude. Now obviously he's probably been out of that area many times, but he only discusses things that are within that range. Okay. And I also want to point out that somebody had indicated to me, and I knew this, but I was going to address it in the following video. 109 longitude does intercept the very west edges of Colorado and New Mexico. But in New Mexico, you'd be out of the search area. And of course, 45 degrees of latitude is far beyond Colorado. So I don't mean to say that the chest is not in Colorado, New Mexico, but for this theory and this discussion that I'm presenting, unfortunately, it is. And please note that I'm also right now discussing broad areas. I believe there's some precision, and that's going to be in my next video, the part 2 video. This first part was just meant to be a broad introduction. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I'm still working on the other video, and I'm trying to do so I don't have to make 10 million follow-up videos for it. And it's kind of a pain in the neck, but I hope to have it out sometime this week. And I think you guys are going to enjoy it. If you do, please subscribe and then click the bell so you get notified when I come out with new videos. Also, do me a favor and pass this video around. Click like. It helps me get some exposure because I don't usually post on any of the blogs, so I don't really advertise my videos when they come out. So it's difficult for me to get people to see it. So anyway, if you have any more questions, leave them again. And this time, I'm probably not going to make another follow-up video. I'm just going to go directly to the next topic. And at the end, after that's over, maybe I'll do a live video and I'll cover questions and answers. I'm just not sure when that's going to happen or when I'm going to have the time to do that yet. But for now, hopefully this is enough to get you over that. And I want to mention one last time, too. I'm trying to avoid discussing what is considered, special knowledge and what is not. I really don't want to get into that discussion. That's not what I'm about. I try to find things that are interesting, but not too deep, okay? And that's what I'm doing in this video. So I have no problem discussing, how does it work or why it might not work. But I don't want the reason to just be something simple like, Forrest wouldn't do that. It's too complicated. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to constantly argue about it. If that's the kind of stuff that you like, maybe you want to go to another channel and just don't watch mine because my stuff is always going to be that way. And that's the way I intend it to be because I think people enjoy it. If you think that it's too complicated, you wouldn't do it, that's fine. Just turn off the video and don't pay any attention to it. I don't, like I said before, I don't think there's anything that you could say is special knowledge. I believe when Forrest said that, he means that you don't need to be a pilot. Okay, you don't need to be a geologist. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. You don't need to know algebra. You don't need to know anything complicated. But should you understand longitude and latitude and reading a map, I don't really consider that complicated. And the fact that 32 degrees is the freezing point, Now, if I were to get into complicated stuff, such as some of the stuff that O discussed in this video, for example, water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen molecules. If you take the angle in degrees of the oxygen and hydrogen molecules, the angle is 109 degrees when water freezes. Precisely at that point, when it freezes, it turns into what they call a lattice structure. Okay. And that is how O was relating his Kerwin solution to freezing, because 109 can be said to represent the freezing point of water. Some people, are not going to agree with that, but certainly that's maybe a little bit more knowledge. Here, I'm trying to step back a minute and say, well, I don't think Forrest would expect people to know chemistry, or molecular physics in order to figure this out. But figuring out the fact that you were following a single line of longitude up to the North Pole and back down again, could he be using the clues to move you along that line and then of course along the latitude to get you to a precise starting point, or or the points for your clues? Certainly, I believe that he could be doing that because this is the kind of stuff that you could be finding on Google Earth. I don't believe that this is special knowledge, but I can't say that this is simple. But on the other hand, I don't think he made it as simple as some people believe. If he did, he wouldn't have been required to write all that additional information. It probably would have been solved in the first couple of years. Okay. But if you look at the chase that's been going on for 10 years now, a lot of it that happened in the early years was people were going at, I'll call it the low hanging fruit, because why not? Right. They went to Yellowstone. They went to, what is it, Aqua Fria, whatever, in Taos, New Mexico. They went to where Molly Brown was in New Mexico. I mean, in Colorado. They went to Browns Park in Colorado. They go to Butte, Montana. Okay. But people have been through all of those places. People have walked those streams. And I mean, the Madison alone, people have probably created trails by searching that river. I don't believe that he intends anybody to do that. I believe that you could solve 99% of the poem at home in order to build the confidence to go exactly where you're going. But I believe that the final clue, Forrest said, can't be solved from home with Google Earth. Now, maybe that has something to do with being sepultured, somehow covered up, or it's just low, or it's beneath the rock. There's no way you can see the final location without being boots on the ground. So literally, he gets you as close as you can to where you're supposed to go, where the blaze is going to be, let's say. And now you've got to be boots on the ground to, one, see the blaze, and two, even have a chance, of course, of seeing the chest. However, I believe that if you use all the hints that are in the book and you work everything out, that you will have enough confidence ahead of time to really have faith in your first 8 clues. And you'll probably have a damn good idea of what you're looking for when you get to the final location. I don't believe that you have to go and walk a football field flipping logs and rocks. That's not precision. That's not walking directly to it. So people are missing things, and I think the reason why they're missing them is they're using one of the vague, millions of locations where warm waters halt, and they're going there and they're picking the nearest canyon and walking up and down it and just looking, and they're trying to fit areas into the clues, but they're not necessarily using Forrest's interpretation of what those clues mean. And I don't believe they're as direct as people think. Yes, I believe there's probably water involved where warm water halts when you get to the map point of it. But in order to find the hints, that may not be the case. That might just be an emotional thing. It might be something that happened to him in the book that doesn't necessarily involve water. And then you pull those hints out, and it'll lead you to the precise location where the water actually is. Okay. But when you finally locate that, that might be a place, one out of the millions of places that you would say, oh, I would have never thought of that. Because, the same thing with the blaze. Let's say that the blaze is a rock. Okay. There's millions of rocks in the Rockies. Right? There's no way, you're going to be able to say, well, oh, look at that. When I start at my warm water salt at the Sinks Canyon, for example, and I go down in the canyon, there's a rock, that's standing on its edge. Now, that's got to be the blaze. No, I don't believe that that's the case. That's too easy. Somebody would see that. Certainly, people are going to rush up and look at a rock that's standing on its edge. And somebody, in fact, would stumble on the chest, possibly, if that were the case. So I think that if we're going, just looking at a map and the poem, it's not, yes, it can be done, but that's like a 1 in a million shot. You're going to have to guess the correct word warm water salt. And then looking there, you're going to have to figure out which canyon he's talking about, because he says not far, but too far to walk. So how do you know there's not 2 canyons? And he's telling you, don't go to the first one. Go to the second one that you're going to have to drive to. Or maybe he doesn't want you to go down the canyon at all. Maybe the home of Brown is right there where warm water salts. So all you have to do is go to a trailhead at the home of Brown, follow the trailhead 500 feet, go off, see the blaze, go off the trail 200 feet, and grab the chest. It might be as simple as that. But I believe that it's going to be difficult. Forrest said that in order to solve the poem, it's going to take a lot of work. You're not going to do it in a Sunday picnic. And knowing Forrest, just based on what I've read, seen, he does not like handing things out. If he wanted to give this away, he would have gave it to a friend of his. He would have gave it to somebody in need. But he's not going to do that. He grew up in a tough time during the Depression. He worked very hard for what he has, okay? And he was kind of the underdog. He didn't have a college degree, and he was constantly being shot down by people because they didn't own a sheepskin. He's an amateur, archaeologist. So he constantly fought a battle and worked for what he has. Sure, a lot of it, the success came from sales because he's a good salesman, but he worked for this stuff. And I believe that he wants people to work for it. He's not going to reward somebody that is never going to go boots on the ground, thinks they're going to solve it 100% at home, and then they're never going to have the confidence to go there. So they're going to beg other people to go for them and do the work or what have you. I don't believe he wants to, or somebody that's just going to look at a map and go out fishing and wander streams that they're going to stumble on it. I don't believe that that's going to happen. You're just going to do nothing but have 100 vacations, in the forest, which is, of course, the side effect, and it's the thing that he wanted. But if you really want to solve this, you got to kind of put the gold out of your mind and forget about this gold fever. There's no such things as instant gratification. You're going to have to work for it, and to work for it, you're going to have to do things like read the book, find the hints that are going to be helpful with the clues. And to do that, you're not going to have to become an archaeologist and a master mathematician or somebody that knows literature inside and out. You're not going to have to be a poet. You're not going to have to go and understand Kismet. All you're going to have to do is just have a brief synopsis of why did he explain that. For example, everybody knows that a lot of the people he mentions cross paths in Montana and Wyoming. For example, Hemingway, I showed in one of my videos where he stayed when he did A Farewell to Arms in 1928. He stayed in the Bighorn Mountains. But in 1931, when he went back, he spent another 6 years there that he spent over at Clark's Fork, Yellowstone, and also up and down the North Fork of the Shoshone. Okay. He loved the place. And the last time I think he was there was 1939. He wrote, I think, a couple of books there, including For Whom the Bell Tolls. So now the same thing can be said with Fitzgerald. He spent time in both Montana and Wyoming, all right? And Fitzgerald, of course, he's a wimpy guy. It's kind of funny if you read about him. He certainly doesn't like it out in the woods. He did it, I guess, to look cool, where Hemingway, on the other hand, he went out and actually shot a damn grizzly bear. And unfortunately, he got injured on the way down after he shot the thing. And then they had to bring him to the hospital in Cody back in the 30s to get his knee fixed. But, and of course, the same thing can be said with all of the trappers and all of the explorers and Lewis and Clark. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that he talked about in this. And there's a lot of things that parallel his story in Vietnam. Like I said in the other video, when he first entered during the Tet Offensive, there was things, for example, Operation Yellowstone took place, and it ended in February of 1968. Well, so there's Yellowstone references there. Also, there's another operation, now that I'm talking about operations, that was called Lewis and Clark, that took place in 1968, and it took place in Vietnam during the war. Okay. And there was yet another mission that took place with, I think, the 2nd Brigade. I don't remember. But they basically came ashore just north of where Forrest was based. And then they brought a whole bunch of people and helicopters and so on and so forth to Camp Radcliffe, which was known as the golf course. And it was up on QL-19 where all the Frenchmen died. And, the Frenchmen that they buried in a standing position, all of that stuff. That was likely where Forrest found the grave, as I pointed out in one of my other videos. It was likely near Mang Yang Pass in Vietnam. And if you were to go as a tourist to Vietnam, you still can't say that that's specialized info, because if you wanted to go there, there's monuments all over the place that are dedicated to the people at war. Because you got to remember that, yeah, they were fighting North Vietnam, but the Tet Offensive was made by, they had political groups in South Vietnam, sympathizers, okay? And they were attacking the South Vietnamese people along with the United States men, of course. And they also took over Saigon, which is when we lost the war, basically. So, this is not really deep history. This is stuff that's somewhat easy to figure out. But you would be very interested that if you take a lot of the points that he discusses and transform them from the 109 East to the 109 West over to the United States, and then add your 32 degrees to that, your freezing point, and up there, they don't just point at random places. For example, one of the spots, depending on where you start, is on top of Grebe Lake, and Forrest discusses Grebe Lake. Also, on page 52, Skippy is standing next to a giant boulder near the falls of the Yellowstone River. Okay, Bill Gorman found out exactly where he took that picture, and it's at one of the overlooks there at the falls. Well, that picture is pretty close to a spot that something significant happened during the time frame that Forrest was there. So you could say that Forrest is umbilically tied from Vietnam up to his early years in Yellowstone, and of course back down to Texas and over into New Mexico, which basically forms a gigantic triangle such as the one that you're looking here. And like I said in the prior video, Doug Preston indicated what would happen if you took and started connecting the dots of places that Forrest mentioned and drew lines. I wonder if that would help you find the chest. That's essentially what he said in the I mentioned the video. Not the Moby Dickens, but the other bookstore interview, Collected Works. That's it. He mentions it in Collected Works. And those of you that are into body language, when he says that, while he's talking about it, keep an eye on Forrest. Okay. But anyway, I figured, what the hell? Try it. Let's try it. Let's look at the points where he was. Is there any significance between any of them in the story? For example, why does Forrest go into depth when he discusses the flight that he took from the north, and he, after he came home, and he flew somebody from some general or whatever. He flew him down. He talks about flying up at 50,000 feet, which, by the way, that is the ceiling for the plane that he's talking about. But maybe there's another reason why he's talking about 50,000 feet. How do you know that when you're in Google Earth, that when you're at certain clues, if you set your altitude level at 50,000 feet, that everything that you're looking at on the map might be in the correct scale in order for you to apply the poem as a map, or in order for you to apply the map that's in Too Far to Walk as a map? Because that's one thing nobody's really come up with yet. What is the scale? How do we get the scale? You can't just go into Google Earth and overlay a map and then scale it to whatever size you want and say that's it. First of all, you have to scale it proportionally. Second of all, you got to locate it at the correct size in the correct position in order for it to have any meaning at all. And the same holds true with the poem. If it is indeed a map, you can't just put it in random locations. There has to be a reason for you to put it where you are. So maybe that's why he's describing certain points. Again, this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy looking into. And right now, at least for the past 2 years, this is what I believe is going to be required. And man, did I just go off on a long tangent there. Anyway, I get into this stuff. I really enjoy talking about it. So again, don't consider this part 2. I'm going to come out with part 2. Consider this a part 1B to kind of address some of the issues that I discussed. And have a great weekend, or what's left of it, folks, and peace.